Let me show you why it's important to use a good agent. So long story short, last week I had a buyer come to me with a cancellation notice from another agency that wrote a policy for a home he purchased back in November. Um, Very frustrating to see, and I figured this would be a good example to really show what can go wrong very quickly. So long story short, here's the notice basically showing granular roof loss or granular loss on the roof. And he sent me basically everything he had back when he purchased home. This right here is a snippet from the required repair documents from his realtor. There were about 19 items on this list. And within that first 5, 2 of them are related to the roof. So immediately in my mind, this throws a red flag. And I'm like, okay, how does this happen? And so we started digging into it. So he sent me the 4-point, and I look at this thing, and immediately, again, huge red flag. Not only is there pictures of roof damage and problems noted in several areas, there is also a giant checkbox here that says unsatisfactory along with missing cracked shingles. So this right here immediately should throw the stop on this and go, no, we cannot bind this policy until there's proof of these repairs completed, rather than what happened here. Ultimately, this is a situation where an agent bound a policy and without the proof of repairs, which keep in mind, we have to upload this 4-point during the binding process or within usually a week after the fact, and showing that this is in fact eligible, because we as agents are responsible for doing a lot of the underwriting, essentially making sure that the home is a good fit for their product, and that's part of our responsibility. So this right here is an example where none of that due diligence was done, and they just bound this policy and let this guy close on this house, only to find out after the fact that this house was, these repairs, number one, these repairs weren't done. The 4-point, there was no follow-up 4-point to even know if any of it was done. And then when it came back, here's the best picture showing that they patched the roof, but they used 3-tab on an architectural shingle. And the reality is most of these carriers don't want to touch any patched roof, much less things like this. So there's a couple important things to point out here. My objective is not to beat anybody up here, but it is important to understand like what makes a good agent. And so in a case like this could have been entirely avoided. Number one, as soon as you see that 4-point, you know this is not going to be a good situation unless that stuff is resolved before clicking bind. And it doesn't matter what pressure comes on us from really from anybody trying to close this house. It is our responsibility, it's my responsibility as an agent to fight back and say, no, we can't, because the carrier's not going to let us, and to prevent anybody from getting in this situation. Because not only does this hurt the agent that wrote this, it also really has hurt everybody in the party, because this buyer obviously is very frustrated, and somewhat rightfully so. The other thing is that this doesn't really apply to new construction so much, just because they're not going to require a 4-point, but there can be things on those 4 points where we may not see as an agent. In other words, that inspector may say everything's in good shape, but then the carrier goes out and turns out he didn't get a clear picture of something, and there actually is a problem. For example, if an inspector goes out, says the roof is in great shape, but then the carrier's inspection goes out there and it's actually not, that would borderline be unavoidable. But that's not what happened here, and I want to show you guys quickly just how avoidable this is, which is a little due diligence. So anytime we're writing these policies, we're running these quotes, then usually we get the inspections, and that's where we go in and tailor these to make sure they're actually legitimate. So in a case like this, it's really as simple as just going to Cabria's guidelines. The other thing is we can call these underwriters pretty easily. And I do in a lot of cases if I'm not sure on something or something seems gray. But we can go here and look at their homeowners guidelines, and I think this is a roofing patch. So literally it's just a matter of like keyword searches, and yeah, right here, roofs that are worn or have unrepaired damage and patches are ineligible. Not just fix it after the fact, they're ineligible, full stop. So as soon as they saw that inspection, they should have said right there to everybody involved, we cannot close this, or we cannot bind this policy until that stuff is resolved and we have proof of repairs. The other thing is, unless that roof was getting replaced, there was enough damages and enough patches that were going to be required. Really, that was the only solution here, that no matter what, this would have been ineligible unless they replaced that entire roof. So this was highly avoidable, and it's put everybody in a really bad situation, especially this buyer who has potentially bought an uninsurable home after the fact until these repairs were made, which should have been done in the beginning. And it's worth noting, I see this kind of stuff all the time, and usually avoidable. It's just lack of going into these underwriting guidelines and making these and just doing this work up front. And I would say that's the biggest thing that separates good agent from a bad agent, which is the willingness to go have the hard conversations, set the expectations up front, do the due diligence, go that extra, not even a mile, that extra inch, just go look at their underwriting guidelines real quick just to make sure that it's a good product fit, versus slamming dirt against a wall and trying to see what sticks and then dealing with it after the fact, just because it's an agent trying to hit numbers or something along those lines versus trying to build something a little more meaningful, which I could go into deep detail on that. I think that is a lot of it too. But yeah, that really is the biggest difference.